right, everybody. Hey, welcome to today's episode. I'm pretty excited. If you exist or you live and you've ever touched Ranger Regiment, you've definitely heard of this man, especially down here in Columbus, Georgia. Someday he may actually run for mayor of Columbus, Georgia. We'll see. I don't know if politics are in his future or not. I got to poke him a little bit. But Major Retired Tony Mayne is our legend for today. And, just to give everybody a little bit of an account of his career, and I'm just touching the wave tops. He served in 375 as an infantryman all the way through to staff sergeant. Then he eventually went the OCS route, as many staff sergeants do when they can't get promoted to sergeant first class. No, I'm just kidding. I'm joking.
Possibly true in this case.
And he retired from Ranger Regiment as a major, serving as a PAO actually at Ranger Regiment before his departure. He has a total of 8 deployments, and he currently works as a director of the Gallant Few at the Rock. He's also involved with Ranger for Life, and we'll definitely have a conversation about that as we get going in the episode. And also, he works for the ministry at the St. Luke United Methodist Church. So, Tony, it's amazing to have you on Legends. I know that you did not think that you should be coming on, but I disagree, and many, many other people disagree as well. So, welcome to the fold of the Legends of the 75th.
Well, let's get started because that's extremely uncomfortable with that. So hit me with one to get this thing rolling.
All right. Well, I saw some of your facial expressions when I was kind of reading the intro. Now, not your intro. You had a lot of faces when I read your intro. The intro that I give for every episode, what's some kind of thoughts and feelings as I read that intro?
Blessed. As an individual, just blessed to be a part of this organization. There are not too many people who join, at least I would say maybe mid-90s and prior, maybe, due to the advent of Al Gore's internet, could really capture and understand what they were getting into in the Ranger Regiment if they didn't have a family member. So the fact that I stumbled into it, absolutely blessed. And then in your intro, you do a great job capturing the culture of the organization. About everything was plural in there. When Rangers recite everything you said, I believe the majority, and that's what I caught on to, was plural.
I didn't even notice that.
It's a big deal, and that's part of the culture. So to be on, even the title of your podcast is Legend. It's not like a legend. It just. That's really kind of what got me. We are about community. We are a dog eat dog organization, right? And alpha dogs eat alpha dogs, but at the end of the day, it's the people, and that's what really I kind of captured. Feel great to be on. So let's get this thing rolling, so I don't have to feel too uncomfortable.
No, I mean I appreciate you kind of analyzing that intro, and I never noticed the plural sense of it before. Wow. I'm reading back through it as you were kind of saying that, and you're absolutely spot on. But that little nuance speaks of the organization itself, that yes, you're right. We are a dog eat, kind of organization, but at the same time, we take care of our own, and it's always about the organization. Everything we do is about the organization and serving the organization and the people that make up it. So, well, you kind of prefaced it a little bit, so how did you find yourself in Ranger Regiment?
Oh, this is goofy. So you take the Army values, and one of them is selfless service. I believe a lot of people of my generation at the time, pre-GWAT, and wanting to be a Ranger, that was very much selfish service. Like, no one that I know of came into Ranger Regiment or was going through the Ranger indoctrination program at that time because they couldn't wait to be a team leader in Ranger Regiment and be in charge of three other Rangers. No, you want to be in Ranger Regiment because you want the beret, because you enlisted to do all these things. So, and that really comes to where my work is today. We'll get to that. But that's what I realized about myself. And then what's the first thing that happens once you leave 30th AG, if you're at infantry OSIT here, at Fort Benning, and you go, what was then called downrange. I think with the deployments, they might have stopped calling that downrange.
They probably did, yeah.
But you get thrown in a team environment and everything's a team, and how all of a sudden the you of recruitment and your wants and desires is now team, and it's just amplified. But that's really, in terms of wanting to be a Ranger, one of the hardest things I could do. I just graduated from Ohio State. I was going to go back home after my time of doing what I wanted to do and what I wanted to get out of the Army, then go back to law school, marry my sorority girlfriend, right? So it was all me. And this was the hardest thing I could do the quickest way.
Okay.
So very much selfish service when you look at it from that construct.
Well, so how did you hear about it though? Because you mentioned, it was hard to kind of hear about Ranger Regiment back in the day before the internet and everything else. So were people talking about it in basic training, or did a Ranger come down? How did that kind of happen?
So I signed a Ranger contract at that time, a RIP contract.
Oh, okay.
I'd been to all the recruiters. I looked at officer and enlisted routes. I had no real backbone of knowing anything about or knowledge base for the difference of officers and enlisted, non-commissioned. I didn't look, contrary to belief, I did not look at pay scales. Like, that was not something that I was doing at that time. But once I hit all the recruiters and I heard that Ranger could be the hardest thing that I could get into right away, I went and read books like the 6 Silent Men books and books that were available.
Wow, I haven't heard that one.
It was mostly Vietnam, at that time. In fact, I think I graduated RIP, or was that summer when Black Hawk Down came out? I didn't know too much about Panama, and that Rangers led the way there. So I wasn't watching CNN as a kid. I was a fraternity boy in college. My mind was not on geopolitical events and individual special operations units and what they were doing. I had my own high value targets I was going after at that time. And it was not necessarily based on what I was doing for the military at that time at Ohio State. So just some reading and some self-reflection, but I went in pretty blind. I always read a lot about the South. I'm a history nerd, like a lot of Rangers are. And I was born in Ohio, went to Ohio State, but TBS, Turner Broadcasting System, amplified my love for baseball. And I became a Braves fan. So I could be a Ranger. It was hard. I would probably be in Georgia, and I could run up and see the Braves all the time. That's like not how you want to pick what you do with your life. That's how I picked what I wanted to do with that what would only be 3 years and 16 weeks of my life.
It's funny to hear your story, because every single one, it seems like, is different, and yours is definitely unique. I would say that the only one that is maybe a little bit more unique that I've heard about is Sergeant Major Merritt. That he actually outcompeted his entire battalion as a private, and his battalion commander is like, you should be a Ranger. So
they're not quite the same at all.
But it's different and it's unique, because it's not the normal Ranger route. Most come with a Ranger contract, and the reason is just what you highlighted. A family member or maybe a mentor growing up was a Ranger, or that they wanted to do the hardest thing. When they went and talked to the recruiter. But some of the other things you feathered in there definitely makes it unique for sure. So when you arrived to Ranger Regiment, as a young specialist, I assume you were a specialist because you had your college degree. All right. Yeah. What'd you get your bachelor's degree in, by the way, sir? I don't know if
like every great, infantryman, political science with a minor in history. I didn't want to write a lot of papers, didn't have to do as many in political science. So I really didn't pick majors based off of, go to college for an education to get a job type thing. I probably should have in retrospect, but there was an accounting class early sophomore year that derailed me from any type of major that might equate to some type of employment.
All right. So you arrived at 375. What was your early experiences, not really knowing what you were getting yourself into?
No. God, no.
Really?
No way. Not even close. Not even close. The men were just beasts.
Mhm.
And I mean that like good and bad. That dog eat dog, when you talk to legends like now I'm so happy my Ranger buddy, Sergeant Major retired Mike Hall.
Yeah.
He talks about the professionalism of the force is what's enabled us, not the capabilities, the professionalism of the force, which has provided us the placement and access to do all the things that we now get to do, or that active duty Rangers get to do as a member of that organization. But when I came in from Ohio State, a quick caveat, no one likes college stories, but this is important to my story and the outlook for kind of what we're doing now and how I look at things. So I was in a college fraternity, and part of that fraternity included hazing. Why did I join a fraternity? Think all the reasons you want. It was cheaper than the dorms.
Okay.
College was very expensive. So if I could get a big screen TV and watch sports all the time with a bunch of other dudes who had, for that level were kind of like alpha males who cared about like sports and stuff, and it's cheaper, well, that made a lot of sense. And so I put up with hazing. So when I came to Ranger Regiment, at that time, the rules were not as defined and the professionalism was not what it was. So there was actually a time in my enlisted period, I had a very difficult time believing that I was in the best light infantry organization in the world because of the games, right? Now, 9/11 took a lot of those games right away because we kind of realized what was important. Time is your most precious resource. And when you truly don't have it, a lot of those things kind of went away. So I was like initially kind of like, why are we doing this to each other if we're the best? Because the story of my college is I actually got rid of hazing in our fraternity. And when we did that, we grew, we paid off our bills and everything was great. And so I'm like, this organization, like, it's pretty awesome. Like, it's got Olympic caliber athletes in it.
Right.
We had one of our platoon leaders was actually a Pan Am boxer, right? It's like, so we have Olympic caliber athletes and like, we're just treating each other like kind of like less than humans. And when you looked at it, the reason why is because we could.
That's fair.
Because we could. Now we can justify anything, but because we could. But then 9/11 happens.
Yeah.
And all of a sudden there's this reevaluation.
Mm-hmm.
And it's amazing where I think from that perspective, where the organization is. Because if you were an infantry officer, right, a platoon leader, pre-GWAT, and you got to be in Ranger Regiment, well, your comparison might be, well, what was it like in the 82nd? Or down at Fort Hood before you came to the Ranger Regiment, and you'd be like, oh my God, right? Probably like this is so much better. When you come up from the enlisted ranks, so
yeah,
it's a little bit different perspective, I think.
And I shared that same exact perspective. When I showed up to Ranger Regiment, there was things that I was like, wow, this is amazing. These are amazing people. And then the other side of it, the hazing and the humiliation and all the bullshit, I was like, what are we doing? Like, why are we doing this? Like, and then like literally getting hazed. I remember one time, like, I'm getting the shit smoked out of me because something I didn't do with my saw on a range. And I'm like, I remember looking at my team leader and I'm like, well, how in the heck was I supposed to know that? Why didn't you teach me that? And obviously it didn't go well for me, but it was the truth, and as I looked at it, in hindsight, I'm like, we could have spent that time doing something so much better. So how long were you in before 9/11 happened, sir?
So that was roughly in the regiment about 2 years.
Okay. So
on my birthday in 2001, the biggest single thing that could ever happen to the Ranger Regiment happened outside of building Fort Benning, and we switched from that black beret to the tan beret. And then a couple of months later, nobody seemed to care as much about that because our priorities shifted. And that was a very big deal and very emotional to folks. Do not get me wrong. I'm just saying to be of that time.
Oh, yeah.
And to live it, to have General Shinseki come to the first MLAT after and then pass out coins to everyone, and for folks to not take them because like, oh, well, everyone gets one. Well, everyone gets a black beret now too. So I mean, it was just goofy, the things going on, and then in an instant, those type of concerns kind of got kind of went all away. And I was actually at PLDC when it happened. We're worried that we were going to miss the show.
Oh, so you were in PLDC when 9/11 happened.
When the first plane hit the trade center, we had someone come in and said, if anybody's from New York, we're going to pull you in a little bit. There's been something tragic that happened in the city, so we need to know if there's anybody here from New York City. We were getting a class on maintenance from an E7, and God bless her. She's very passionate and serious about her job. And she said, well, what's going on is important, but this class, this will stay with you for the rest of your career. So, I mean, she was off a little bit. Not everybody can be Notre Dame, but I was in PLDC with a bunch of other Rangers right here at Fort Benning. We knew that we would most likely battalion called. You don't know about individual companies or whatnot.
Yeah. I didn't realize it, but our timelines are actually pretty similar. So I was promoted to sergeant literally in August of 2001. So we were sergeants around the same time. Interesting. I didn't know that. So were you guys pulled from PLDC, or that you were able to graduate and then all the planning had happened and everything else for the invasion of Afghanistan?
So on my graduation day there at Building 4 here at beautiful Fort Benning, in the back of the auditorium in BDUs was my squad leader, and he said, let's go. Right after graduation, inside of his car was already my LCE and my Kevlar helmet, and we went straight out to Decker Strip, and we did the rehearsal mission for what would be the jump into Rhino. So I was from ceremony to rehearsal inside of whatever that drive is. If you do it legally, about 17 minutes max.
Yeah. Wow. Well, talk us through, the event, the preparation and everything leading up to the jump, and then the jump itself, sir.
Well, first of all, you're just waiting, right? From 9/11, PLDC to actually onward movement. You're just waiting. Connexes are packing, repacking, doing all the PT you can. Mission rehearsals over and over, and then getting to the forward staging base, and just waiting, and just the immense heat of where we were at that time. And we hadn't quite perfected our air conditioning at that time. I mean, first world problems, don't get me wrong, right? But it was, learning about, bottled water, the local nationals, and it was the coolest part of all of it that I remember when we're talking mission prep is, I mean, this was the world's response, right? So we had the world SOF around us. Like, that was what was pretty cool. And to see, like, I thought Rangers were big, but like, you got to see like everybody, and it was just such a heightened mission focus. But over a couple of weeks, Rangers being Rangers, Ranger games start. We started playing chess. To this day, I think I've won 3 games of chess in my entire life. That includes against my son. And like, everybody started playing chess. It was like the weirdest thing, because it was one of those things that should take a long period of time to kind of do. Not necessarily in my case. But that and working out, that's when we really started designing, the different workouts. If people trying to figure out how we're going to get protein here, that was a very big deal. I mean, if you've deployed since in the GWAT, you have seen the maturation of protein powder. And different things that the government thinks is suitable for its soldiers in that regard. But
that's a different way to think about the deployment.
I mean, remember that stuff? Like, it came out like powder, but looked like a goo. So it at first looked like almost like a power bar-esque. And then you're not storing stuff right, because it's not, these built up complexes. So things are in the heat, and it's just like, oh, casein protein. Yeah, milk. Keep it away from heat. Kind of a good deal. Good idea. But it was, when I look back at that, my memory is not, I am not the Ranger who remembers every single person and every single event. I just remember that environment. And what's super cool is, like, you knew you were going to do something. You had a pretty good idea you were going to jump in,
Yeah.
But like the waiting of the wind and whatnot, and what I saw for the first time, so you juxtapose that from when I first came in, I talked about the hazing. There became a lot of equality in terms of, okay, this is a specialist, he does a specialist job, right? It wasn't like, specialist, we're going to do this thing over here, right? It was very much like, dude, we got a job to do. Like when we get the call, like we all got a job to do. And that was really, I can point to those few weeks there when all of a sudden it was like, okay, reindeer games happened, right? But it was not at the level that I saw before, for sure.
Well, and everybody is getting ready to do the exact same thing, and the weight of that and the weight of the nation, if we're being honest, the weight of the nation was on your guys' shoulders as you guys got ready to jump as well. Because, like you said, it was a response. It was one of the response efforts, and you were leading the charge, much to the chagrin of us up at 275. We're in Germany, and we felt we were closer. 375 was the ones that was designated. We've already talked to General McChrystal about this one.
That's okay. But as General McChrystal said, we were his favorite.
That's
Charlie Company was his favorite company. As I remember the conversation. No, but I mean, it's just all a blessing, right? So very early in my career, there's another Ranger legend, a Sergeant Major retired Kevin Cannell. And for anyone who knows about his career with the unit and regiment, just what a legend, what a humble leader. Did I know him very well? Do I know him very well? No, I do not. Only in passing at some different Ranger events. But I remember walking my squad to EIB. And here he comes walking by. And when Kevin Cannell walks, like it looks like a run with those long legs. It's just insane. And he turns to us and he goes, Rangers, let me tell you something. All this stuff that you get, like, that's just for showing up. Like you're supposed to do that. But this EIB, this is important. Right. And those are like, because like you train for it, like you can do this. This is your expertise. But those are the type of folks pre-jump, right? Pre 9/11 that some of us were blessed to be exposed to, who had already been there. Because the guys who've been there and done that, right? The guys like a Rob Phipps, that's who you look to. All of a sudden, now no one cared if you were an honor grad at Ranger School. No one cared about your PT score. It's like, it's have you been to the show? Because if I'm talking to you, you've survived the show, which is also something kind of important.
That's true.
Yeah. So Rob Phipps, I think that guy got worn out more than anybody else before that first jump, for sure.
So jumping into Afghanistan for the first time, talk us through that. First combat jump.
You had mentioned like the weight of America being on your back. It's the weight of other Rangers. So I've never been at a part where I've been so confident in my abilities that it hasn't first been the Rangers that I was responsible for or alongside of that wasn't my biggest concern. Right. So that nation stuff, we knew it was a pretty big deal. And when we got the shoot tags that says freedom endures, like that was a big deal. But like, you don't really want to be the person who jacks up a combat jump, right?
Yeah, absolutely not.
I will tell you, there were more people faking the funk on that jump than I've ever seen in my entire life in terms of confidence. And I appreciated it. I needed it. But wow, man, it's something when the jump master goes out first.
Yes, absolutely.
It is something when you hand a static line off to a safety. When we opened up the doors after I know 3.5 hour trip, I mean, you could smell like you were in a different place. Like this wasn't like going over Friar Drop Zone, right? Like it's like, holy shnikes. And the low leveling you do for real, one heck of a deal. So we board the plane. We have 3.5 hours. You're worried about being hydrated. You're passing around a 5-gallon water can that is no longer being used for water. There's a lot of spillage. Like you want to get out of that thing. And then you do the Ranger Creed together. And I believe it was at the 10-minute mark, might've been closer to 6. And it's just people yelling. Like it is not a Ranger rendezvous. And some people said they were so jacked up for it But once again, me, like come from a long line of Irish Catholic family, so I got guilt, right? So I'm worried about jacking stuff up too, right? So I'm like, man, these guys are super motivated for what we're about ready to do. Like, I wanted to do my job and do it well for my guys. And the moment you're used to exiting an aircraft, especially for an MLAT, and you see lights, right? Like you see something. Because you still have, around the airfield, there's something somewhere. You can't
there's
shut
some
off,
city,
entire grids. Like you can get your bearing. Darkness from pre-assault fires. A few things were on fire, but I mean, it was like it smelled and it was dark. And that whole hit the ground, 3 to 5 seconds early. Oh my goodness, something on the desert strip. When I hit the ground, just to show once again, as a legends of the 75th, guest, how I do everything right. Feet, head, Kevlar comes off. I'm on the ground in Afghanistan looking for my Kevlar helmet, and I give myself 30 seconds. I don't find it. So I start recovering my chute, and it happens to be right there. And I'm like, that, I can't even see. Like, knots would probably be helpful. How am I going to, all these things are going through my mind. So because these type of things happen to me, like, I am not the most confident, I'm like, oh my gosh, that was nuts. And so once we get on the ground, we get to the assembly area, that's when the calm is, because that's where your buddies are at.
Yeah, absolutely.
And now you got overwhelming firepower. You just know that things are going to go your way. And so we were able to enter the compound. In fact, the first ranger who that I know of who fired around in anger, Travis Edison, who was also my roommate, entered the first compound of the shack, and then after that, it's pretty much smooth sailing for the clearance and the SSE and the job that we had to do. And after we loaded, coming off, like the adrenaline, like that was, you couldn't find any. You couldn't find it. Guys were just, you think guys would be jacked up after doing that? Within minutes, guys were racked out. They were done. Because it was so hard to sleep for days ahead of time too, right?
Yeah,
it was just absolute tiredness isn't the word, but you're just weary, exhausted.
Exhausted, yeah. Because
more mental. It wasn't a physically demanding mission. No one went super far. We didn't do something super fast. If you had to look at once you got on the ground, it was easier than what we do for MLATs, like way easier. But man, the mental toll, it was something. And then we came back, and then we heard about Stone Cipher and Edmonds, that they had died on the QRF. And someone that I later worked for in Charlie Company, first sergeant, I'm an emotional person, like not the typical ranger. Like I try too hard to be stone faced, but because of that exhaustion, two guys who I really didn't know that well, if in passing, I started crying. So I had to go away from whatever detail or whatever recovery doing. And I was just like, I couldn't believe Rangers died on this because of the euphoria, right? Like, no offense, but the rest of my life, I could say I jumped into Rhino. Not that I do that, right? This isn't the Rob Riggle thing with who shot Bin Laden, right? Like I don't do that. But the point is, in the back of my mind, when the nation called, how blessed were the band of brothers that was Charlie Company, plus a lot of attachments who needed to jump too. How blessed were we to be able to do that? And here are two guys who didn't get that opportunity because of a damn brownout, right? Who lost their lives at such a young age. And I started crying. And I remember Sergeant Major Pippin coming over to me and she's like, "Did you know those guys?" I was like, "No, they were Rangers." And that's all I could get out. And then after that, I think, oh, people are noticing. So then I kind of cut it off a little bit. But it was a lot. General Franks comes later, lines us all up. We all get a hug because President Bush told him, "Hey, we get a hug." We're more upset that we don't get the 2 pints that the Brits were going to give us for coming back and doing the jump. That was a bone of contention. We pretty much knew the way that was going to go, but we were so upset about that. And then it was just, you recover, you do everything. And it's like, good Ranger leaders were like, okay, let's get ready to do it again. Because we just didn't know what we didn't know at that time.
Yeah, we didn't know what we were going to be doing.
Yeah. Yeah, it's like the 3 years of our lives, I think, kind of. Yeah, the first 3 years were a lot like that.
No, it's very true. I really appreciate you sharing that, talking about the fragility of life and of Rangers and everything else and how that hit you. And I think every single Ranger, even if they didn't know somebody, because of circumstance and just what was going on in life, it hits everybody differently. Obviously, when you know them well, that hits you hard, but I think everybody can relate with that. We've all had that kind of moment in time where we've struggled through, getting that kind of news. So I definitely appreciate you not only saying that, but then also highlighting those Rangers that, gave the ultimate sacrifice as well. So I appreciate it.
I mean, and for the rest of my career, what it did, officer enlisted, none of that shit really mattered to me. But I looked at war a lot different, Mike. There's this invincibility when you're a Ranger. This was supposed to be it was supposed to be an easy mission. Anybody who was part of the planning of that flight route and the concerns there knew that was not an easy mission. But when you go to war, the enemy and the condition, they get a vote. And I truly believe that it shouldn't be easy to kill people. And we're very good at it. Don't get me wrong. Yeah. I'm not talking about surgical. I'm not talking about that. What I'm talking about is the mental, physical, emotional impacts of killing people. You never want that to be easy.
No, I agree.
You would not, as a society, as a force. So it's something that you would then want to address and figure out how to best kind of do that. So that experience for me, I think, although I'm horrible with my family, with my soldiers, gave me a level of empathy that I was like, okay, so we lost those two guys, but how was everybody else feeling? And here I am. I'm a guy who enlisted just because I wanted to do something hard. So I've always, kind of tried to look at all that contextually. Might be getting ahead of myself there with the things we do now, but like this is where it all comes from. I'm just a dude, right? That mission would have happened without me.
Mm-hmm.
Right. So in that opportunity, but it did. And it probably did for a reason. So there's probably a purpose to that. Probably my job to figure out what that purpose is.
Well, I think you have. And we'll definitely get into that as we go through the episodes. And I want to come back to two things that you mentioned, because there's some things, little nuances matter. They do. I've found that people appreciate them. You said on the shoot tags, it said freedom endured.
Endures, yes.
It endures. Okay.
Freedom endures.
Who wrote that on there? Did you all write that on there, or was it already on there?
Well, one, I have to make sure no one took it out of my office. But no, so what it was a picture of a very famous picture of a flag being erected at the at Ground Zero.
Okay.
And on one side it said freedom endures, and then on the back it said it in the native tongue, the same thing on the shoot tag. So same picture on both, just our language, and then
really
on the back. Yep. Wish I would have had that. Would have showed that.
Yeah, no kidding. Wow. Okay. Well, you'll definitely have to send us a picture. We want to make sure that we talk. That's just a cool little thing that a lot of people wouldn't know about. That's amazing. That's awesome. Yeah. And then the second thing that I kind of wanted to come back to that you mentioned as well is just shit. I lost it. Shit. All right. Chad, we're going to have to edit that part out because I totally had a brain gap and what I was going to say. And that sucks. I'm sorry, sir. That doesn't happen very often. All right. Well, so talk to us about, the rest of the deployment, with 375 and you guys getting into Afghanistan permanently. Well, we didn't know at the time would be permanently, but getting there permanently.
So we pretty much folded up shop from the FSB and went back to the States. And it wasn't until our second deployment where Camp Alpha, or rather Bagram Airfield, what was kind of starting to get established as the what felt like the headquarters of the coalition response. And so by the second deployment, we replaced Second Battalion, and spend some time in Bagram, kind of refining some skills, doing some training before we actually do go forward. And my group was able to drive out from Bagram to Asadabad, which was one heck
it's a long drive
of a go there. Yeah. It wasn't my worst drive ever. That would come in the next deployment for sure. But it was something. And I remember that Asadabad time was kind of, I wouldn't say it wasn't very exciting for what some modern day Rangers have done for sure. But I do remember the first time that the term IED was used. And saw what it did to a Hilux truck. And it was on one of our last missions, and in the last couple of weeks we were there. And this was in place about between like thigh and head level into a mountain. And I'm like, well, that's not fair. I'm like, that would really suck. And then to think about how we spent the rest of our time over the entire GWAT, and it just goes back to, like, it shouldn't be easy to kill people, right? You're on somebody else's soil, right? And they get a vote.
Yeah, absolutely.
Right. So that really, during that second deployment, something that was pivotal to my experience, as we waited to go out to Asadabad from Bagram, is that I read the entire front to back New Testament. I'd never done that before. And I read it without any type of study Bible. So I don't recommend that for anybody, because it's easy to get lost in context. But at that time in my life, like, that was a very pivotal thing. And it made me think about all these things, Mike, about life, what I thought about life, what I thought about my buddies, if they would get hurt, what would happen to me if I got hurt. So that deployment, although not super exciting by modern Ranger terms, really hit to set the tone for the rest of my life after.
So that was the start of kind of your spiritual journey.
So I grew up with faith, right? I'd given my life to Christ. I just didn't know how to do it. And I didn't know if I really wanted to do it. And I didn't do it too well after that. But this, if you read that book, in my opinion, and you, like most Rangers, care about history, all of a sudden you start looking at things like, early in the GWAT, right? So if you enlist because of selfish service in a time prior to the GWAT, when you're just going to train and maybe go to Ranger school and you don't know, right? There are some questions that may not come up, but when you've got a lot of time deployed before you're going to do a mission, you start thinking about the history of the place. Like, why is this happening here? Why is the Middle East always kind of crazy? Right? How comes they take Christian shrines, where ISIS tried to remove them, but you take Christian shrines throughout the Middle East and they protect them because it's part of their story too. So now all of a sudden this stuff, I'm like, wait, there's a history component to this. It's just not gobbly-goo, make me feel good. Let me dive deeper. Now that's just part of my story, right? So that's what I found very interesting. So that's where my head was going. So from that time, when for my other deployments throughout my life, when I was going somewhere, I would kind of look up like, what's the real story of this place? Because you can answer a lot of questions of why the people are the way they are outside of the little fact book, right? If you actually kind of like dive into some history. So that was a big deal for me, and it helped me deal with and understand once again, since my value isn't on this life, although important, it's about the next one. Like, man, I think that helped me become a better leader later on. So that was a pretty big deal for me.
That's good. It's an important part of, your kind of journey, and it's important to talk about that. So the second deployment to Afghanistan was prior to 2003, correct?
Correct. Yep. The 2002. Yeah. So we
Okay.
were 2001, 2002, then 2003. Saddam's got to go.
Yep. Saddam's got to go. And you get the opportunity to have a second jump into Iraq. So are you a staff sergeant at this time?
I think I'm staff sergeant promotable, definitely squad leader, but staff sergeant promotable. And this time, you know a little bit more about war.
Are you a jump master also?
I am not. I am not. My team leader passed his first time on the pre-test at Benning. All right, but he was worried he wouldn't get this jump because they told him they were going to make him a safety. That guy has gone on to a very illustrious career, and we can't use his name because of some of the things that he's done. But no, so not a jump master. But I do know that people try to shoot down planes. I learn a little bit more about that.
Yeah.
And there is a pucker factor of jumping into Iraq that is way different. Now, all of a sudden, whatever it is, whatever we slow down to, 80 knots, whatever, 130 knots, like,
yeah, 120 knots. Yeah.
This is like fish in a barrel. Yeah. And now, granted, all we have to see are pictures of the we have pictures to see of them actually hitting planes from Iran. Like they can actually hit planes. Yeah. They have before. And when you're in that tin can, like you're trying to get the report, like, are they shooting at us or are we just shooting off flares?
Yeah.
Like that thing there's nobody cool as a cucumber during that. There was nobody was panicked per se.
Yeah.
But there was a little bit of like, oh, here we go. Here we go. Yeah. And that was an interesting time. That my jump was, and then for our company, what was uneventful. Kind of sometimes you got to know your place, and our place was to set up a desert landing strip that was able to use for follow-on operations. It allowed for a higher tier unit to set up a forward surgical team that resulted in saving an operator's life who was shot in the head. Right. And I will tell you, I get just as much satisfaction of being a part of that. Right. As I kind of matured and got in, like, okay, we all have our place here. It's not all about me. I thought that was super awesome. And then a day later, they decide to land in some ground mobility vehicles that we had just gotten. And we took a little trip to the Haditha Dam. And that, my friend, was the worst drive I've ever been on.
Well, I definitely can amplify your thoughts about, the possibility of jumping into Iraq, because we were, 275, we were going to jump with 175 into buyout. And, outside of issuing the chutes and doing pre-jump, we had done a lot of rehearsals and a lot of planning to go into that. And I can't totally remember. It all blends together. We might even have done a rock drill. I don't remember.
Oh, there was rock drills. I didn't even bring it up because when you look back on it now,
yeah.
Thank God Rangers weren't responsible for that decision, because we wouldn't be talking right now.
Probably not. No.
Yeah, you don't jump on that airfield. Like, once again, like, here I am, college boy, and I'm just taking a look at it, and I'm like, so let me get this right. So this platoon has to take down 20 buildings.
Yeah.
That are armed.
Yeah.
This one platoon. Like, if we don't do something, it's failure for some. I mean, I don't know. God bless the faith put into the Ranger Regiment to possibly do that.
Yeah.
In retrospect, when you saw what happened with armored forces on the ground. Yeah. I think the right decision was made by our military leaders.
No, and when we linked up with Third ID, I can promise you that we thank them.
Oh, I mean, Third ID, God bless them. Yeah. What they did over the GWAT.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
Man, amazing work.
Well, I think it's important, you give a shout out to a lot of people that might not just know this. So Third ID was already in Kuwait for 6 months for a different exercise. Then got notified that they were going to be part of the invasion of Iraq. Waited around for almost another 2 months before that happened. And then did, I want to say, almost another year. it had to have been, because when we came back, there a lot of them were still there. Some of them weren't, some of them had been, but they spent, well over 18 months deployed. Oh, by the way, they seized the airfield so that we didn't have to. And then also were our QRF force that we actually rode in the back of their Bradleys while we hit Bath members and stuff all over in Iraq until the Humvees showed up. So a little bit, a lot of people just don't necessarily know that. But Third ID, man, they saved our bacon in a lot of different ways during those early days. So little bit of Ranger history there. All right, so driving to Haditha Dam, not only the drive, but then the fight of Haditha Dam.
So, well, like I said, the drive was unnerving. So I was driving the battalion XO, right, who was the ranking officer on the mission, as well as the FSO. So kind of some important people that you want to have around if there's a firefight. And it was, I don't know that we ever drove at night like that. Like that was insane. And talk about being exhausted from that, whatever 8-10 hour drive, whatever it was. When we got to the Remain Over Day site, and then got the mission for the dam, actually briefed to us. Holy shnikes. I mean, we were smoked, and it was like, we'll get some sleep, because next period of darkness, like you're going out again. Which, as we know, becomes, what we did, and what the guys continue to train to do,
Yep.
For over a couple of decades. But coming up on the dam and just know that, like, gosh, I don't know if we had aerials. Like, I don't know who saw it. I can't remember. I just remember sketches. We got General Doyle who I later worked for as a company commander. He's got his Ranger handbook out. And is doing everything, because that's who he is. Like, he's doing everything by the book instead of missions brief. And I remember leaving the mission brief, and I'm like, I don't know if I know what we're doing exactly. Like, it's once again, it goes like a biop scenario. It's like, oh, we'll get to the dam and then we'll clear it. How many floors is it? 13. And you're just, let me make sure I got this right. We're taking like a company minus to do this. Like, and it's like, oh yeah, this is war. This is what's expected of Rangers, right? So, right.
Impossible odds.
Well, I mean, goodness gracious. And then as we were going, just a report of who was in the area, I think it went from a platoon to a company side. Like, oh, by the way, there's like brigades, like where they can get to you within an hour or two. And like, that's from being on the jump and being able to see pre-assault fires as far west as we were, I was like, man, this lack of armor, like, that's not super cool.
Yeah.
Like, these people have tanks and they fought somewhat recently.
Yeah.
I mean, decade plus, but like they fought. Like that was a very, very naked feeling. We did have Sergeant Major Birch with us, though, so that's always a calming effect.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, that man's worth like a company himself.
I mean, and what he did was worth a company itself. So when we get to the dam, our platoon has the lower objective. Bravo company has far and near side security of the dam, and my vehicle brakes on the way to our objective, and we barely get it back up the hill, top of the dam. And so I'm like, I'm not with the rest of my platoon. That's kind of sucky.
Yeah.
Some great things by some great individuals happened there. You got two regimental sergeant majors serving as squad leaders down there. Kurt Donaldson, Mike Albaugh, do some heroic acts. Not a shock to anyone who knows them.
Yeah, absolutely.
And then I'm sitting up top, getting a view of everything, and it's just like, this place is huge. Like this is telling, hey, company, go take like Texas Stadium. Right, Texas Stadium. Do you know you can fit like 4 Astrodomes inside of the Texas Stadium? Like, it's redonkulous. And like, yeah, go take this. Right, it was just amazing. It was a long night. It was a long fight. People did way super more heroic things than me. I got my guys in an ambush, didn't mean to. So we missed a turn. Once it became daylight, we missed a left-hand turn. We couldn't see it because it was kind of blind. It's all desert. It didn't see it. Firing from both sides. I've used the term Polish ambush and been told not to use that term. So I will not use the term Polish ambush. Caught into that and then had to make a decision to either continue through it, which is what you're supposed to do. But we had nothing and no people on the far side. We turned around in an ambush. And if you believe in God, or if you don't believe in God, it's going to strengthen you either way. So we made it out of there. Benjamin Gale got a shot to his sappy plate. I think the 7.62 like stuck in it too, which was pretty cool.
Yeah, I believe so,
as far as that goes. Driver got the $1 million Purple Heart shot in the foot, right? But our vehicle was littered and it smoked back up to the top. And so when you have something like that happen to you, you kind of realize that there's might be a purpose for your life. Yeah. Now, I also realized maybe that purpose wasn't as a Ranger leader, because like this is not going according to plan. We the dam, after that was under control, the initial fighting was done. Another 10 days of being mortared. Sergeant Major Birch doing legendary things. The Rangers on the far side from Bico, and the platoon escapes me. I believe it was second. I hope I'm not wrong. The famous sign, happy motoring, right? Just riddled with bullets. I mean, they just got an onslaught every night. This dam was so big, though, you couldn't hear the fire on the other side.
Really?
You would get reports, but like we were so thin, you couldn't just move a bunch of combat power. Like, and this is during the invasion. Like now we're talking massive spaces, problems with CAS and rotary wing support and all that. Very hard to get, and it was an important mission, but we weren't necessarily the priority, right? So
yeah, there was a lot going on.
It was a lot going on, as a fair statement.
Awesome. Well, you come out of that deployment unscathed, better for it, and you learn a lot of lessons, and you get your second combat jump, so 2 mustard stains. 2 mustard stains. Did you ever become a jump master?
I did. Take it easy, you.
All right.
I mean, you just know it, right?
Yeah.
You just feel. I mean, but this is what's great about Ranger Regiment. What you just did is you reinforced what Simon Sinek said when he came and he visited Ranger Regiment. And after he got a brief about our assessment and selection, he said, this place has a culture of accountability. So that question was really an accountability to the organization question, which I do appreciate. Yes, I did become a jump master.
Finally. Good. I'm honored to hear that. So decision to become an officer. Explain that. I mean, you got to think about it. You think about it from another perspective, the outside perspective. And I know it's your life, but you're a seasoned, enlisted leader, promotable staff sergeant, 2 combat jumps, deployments to 2 different theaters as the main effort, being in 375, multiple times. You're kind of living what many would say is the dream as a Ranger leader.
It is. I think it's a factor. I think about this all the time. If it wasn't for my wife and family, I wish it never would have happened. So I always think back. So why did it? Well, first, I think it started because I was only going to enlist for me for a short period of time. Yeah. And then the events happened. Right. I don't know without war if I would have even stayed longer than I did. So when I say that whole selfish service, like it was kind of a thing. But when I decided that I wanted to stay in, Mike, I didn't care. It wasn't about money. It wasn't about rank. It wasn't about future retirement. I was impatient. It's one of the reasons I joined the Army out of college and wanted to be a Ranger out of college. I really thought about this. Like, I was impatient. when you make staff sergeant in 4 years, which I don't know if you can still do. I think we had a time waiver or something.
Yeah.
So that happens, and I'm staring down the barrel of 3 more Kilo 22s, our live fire exercises before I even get the chance to be a platoon sergeant, because that's just the way that it is. Like, no offense, I hate the Army's promotion system. I think it's totally broken for a lot of reasons. I know why it exists and why it's there. But remember, Congress is in charge of mandating, so actually it's the government who says how we promote, not the Army itself. But that's not the point. So I was looked at staring down the like 3 years of doing it. If they would told me, hey, you were halfway decent, man, and you could be a platoon sergeant in a year or two, game changer. But I'm just not probably mature enough at that time to realize what I had. You can look back from 20 years and say, goodness gracious. I could also say, like, I joined it for 3.5 years and I got to do all this stuff. Like, I win.
Yeah.
Right. But that's what fair. Regiment taught me is that I did want to continue to serve, and I wanted to be in charge of more people. I didn't want to wait 3 more years to be in charge of 40 people. So if I'm going to be at war and I'm going to go, I'm going to do it as an officer. The other part that is true, which shows my ignorance, is that being a reader of history, like, this is the typical officer move that you'll enjoy. I read the book Al-Qaeda, right? It comes out and it says, well, one thing we'll never do is, go into Iraq, because you don't have to go into Iraq. There's no Al-Qaeda in Iraq. Because Saddam Hussein would kill him, right? It's a thing, right? You start looking at history and tea leaves, like, we'll never try to make a democracy in Afghanistan because, well, the Russians tried to do communism, like, with overwhelming combat power, like, and try to overwhelm it. Like, you start reading this, it's like, well, this stuff's all going to be over. Like, so I was kind of like, well, Afghanistan fell really quick. Looks like there's a government. We just got Saddam within a year, right? Everything, or quicker than that, everything fell really quick. In my mind, I was like, this is the time to pivot. I mean, talk about being stupidly wrong. I don't even know how to say that. I was just wrong. I was just 100% wrong, but I thought I was staring down the barrel of a bunch of training cycles. That second deployment to Afghanistan was nothing like what the Ranger Legends of the GWAT went through. And so that was kind of one of the reasons. If I'm going to stay in the Army, I want to be in charge of more people, because I am a Type A Ranger in that regard. All right. And then I'm a college football guy, and I want to stay to grow up Clemson, and that would all work out really good. And the Army's going to pay for it. I told this story before, and I want to tell it again real quick. Talk about people mattering. So General Doug Brown, then second in charge, I think at that time was called the deputy at SOCOM. He came to Haditha Dam, met with like 6 of us. I do the whole coin thing, talking, seeing the train and whatnot. He asked me, so what's your plans? What are you going to do? He's like, I'm staying as an officer. And of course, officers generally like to hear that. That's not a bad thing for them. And I was like, but I've got a waiver for my hearing. And so I'm waiting for that to be cleared up, or I'm going to miss school. The day I showed back up to Ranger Regiment, 3rd Battalion from that deployment, I already had the paperwork done. So once again, people, man, people. So, I don't know. That's kind of interesting. So the officer thing, wanted more leadership, and I didn't know what I didn't know. Yeah. No, absolutely. That's why getting back mattered so much.
Well, okay. So now, you become an officer, and, your first assignment is not in the 75th. What was that culture shock like?
So I thought it was really, it was mechanized for one. In an armored division in Germany. And so within a month of being there, after 2 years of really a break at ROTC at Clemson, I was assigned to the unit that was a part of the quick reaction force in Kuwait. And signed for, within 2 weeks of becoming the platoon leader, 20 Bradleys, because they had all these, it just, you couldn't make it up, but it's war, so who cares? Very early, I realized the opportunity, though, that I had to lead. I realized very early what it meant to be, a scroll wearer in the conventional forces, and what was expected. You get the main effort all the time. which is awesome, which is a great opportunity. I remember a good friend of mine, he's no longer with us, but he was also a platoon leader and just like different backgrounds, straight ROTC, training cycle. And we were going over mission planning, and he's like, so what's your exfil plan? I'm like, okay, I get this. I think I know what you're doing. Like, what's your exfil plan? It's like those plans never work. We're going to figure it out once we're on the ground. Like that was like pretty interesting. And although that might be a true statement on his part, at the time, I was like, oh my goodness. My hardest part of the conventional forces was not to, as we could expect, not to usurp my platoon sergeant. And I don't think I ever did that. Mm-hmm. That we actually had a great relationship, and a very difficult deployment, and it's we've all driven down roads we don't want to, but sometimes in SOF you have the option not to drive. I mean, that emotionally can play on you when you don't have the ability not to go past a hulk that's still burning because the engineers haven't got it in Ramadi yet. Like it was something. And so a lot of compassion and a huge heart. And then when we look at Rangers, our responsibility, it's not just to take care of our own. It's to take care of everybody. Like it's our job to kind of lead the way with things that we get blessed with in terms of the care and the healing. We got to give that to other people too. I mean, we'll give people scopes and rifles and recommendations, but there's some other things that we can pass on that are kind of just as valuable. I didn't think that question would kind of bring that up in me. I'm having a hard time through it right now. But those kids, I mean, like we wanted to be Rangers. Well, they wanted to be soldiers. Like,
yeah, absolutely.
What's the difference? I mean, I mean, at a surface level, just enlisting and joining.
Yeah, they want to serve. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
I definitely understand that. And witnessing, just I don't have any other way to say it, but just the stupidity that resulted in loss of life and, just terrible things happening, watching Marines up north in Aliquim and some of the things that they were, just told to do. And, like you said, SOF, we have a choice to do things differently. And sometimes we'll just do them differently and we won't ask anybody to do them differently. We'll just do them differently. But, they would be told, you're going to do this and this is how you're going to do it. And we don't give a shit what you think.
You bringing up the Marines, I will tell you, Mike, oh my gosh, I might lose it. That esprit de corps, what they endured with less and more, I mean, with more heart, unreal. And anybody who makes Marine jokes, there's the Eaton Crowns thing, all that kind of crap. But I will tell you, unless you saw them during the GWAT, especially early in Iraq, like don't open your mouth. You do not want to be that ignorant. And I've never seen a war fighting force like that at that size and scale than what I saw the Marines in Ramadi.
Yeah,
I mean, they unleashed hell. They went through hell. They unleashed hell. They ate it, and they gave it back. Just absolutely amazing. Absolutely amazing with what they did every day.
Yep, I agree. Well, I think it's awesome that we're sitting here giving shout outs to other organizations as well, Third ID and Marines, absolutely. And I share the sentiments. Well, okay. So PL, out in the conventional force and your route to come back to Ranger Regiment to serve as an officer.
So finally, like it kind of, I wanted to stay with my guys. We got another deployment out there with that unit. 2-6 Infantry Gators, which was a great experience. And Colonel Michael Schrout was a great leader for me. Our Command Sergeant Major Bowers, just awesome individuals. And then I go to the 82nd. And I, end up working for, General Doyle there when he was a battalion commander. And then, so as a captain, I come back to Ranger Regiment, and it probably took less than 2 weeks for me to realize that I was out of my league.
Really?
Out of my league. 10 years the differences. We weren't wearing LCEs anymore, kid. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, and the professionalism hit you straight in the face, right? You knew about what rope was, and then you come to RASP 2, which is not rope. And then you just see the way that the NCOs speak. You see the professionalism, the facilities, just everything. I mean, I had a 10-year gap. I didn't come back for a rendezvous or anything. Like I was busy and building a family. War was a thing, So when I came back, I was like, geez, oh Pete's. And the first person I meet is a gentleman named Julian Chavez there at the barracks.
Julian.
He's telling me that like I'm going to go through with like Ranger NCOs, and I'm like, shit. Like this is no bueno. Like these guys, like it's not just us here trying to learn, and like I know where I'm stacked in conventional armies, but those guys to this day, that spoke to the professionalism of Ranger Regiment. And I'm not that smart, but I also kind of got like, oh, these are some checks on the organization, right? This is a check against organizational drift, right? This is a way to keep people right. This is ensure that culture of accountability, right? Oh my gosh, like that was something. So when I was selected, I came back as an assistant air officer, became the air officer, and I was overwhelmed. Conceptually, guys were so much smarter than me. I now know that I'm suffering from a little bit of memory loss, which I don't mind saying. One, because I want other people to get checked out for it. The second is like that's my excuse for being horrible. Later get diagnosed with mild dyslexia too, which for anybody who's read anything that I've written without an editor also makes a lot of sense.
All right.
But honestly, just could not keep up. My peers are Adam Armstrong, Russ Necessary, Kid Aboho. I'm listening to Kid Aboho do a rock drill before an MLAT, and I'm like, that's what I'm supposed to be. I ain't him. But what that did is it made me really like, I wanted to earn my spot every day because I knew I was stealing it from somebody who was good. I am being truly honest. That's not a planned remark. Like, oh my gosh, like I realized how good everybody was.
Yeah.
Like, and there'll never be another team like that.
Yeah.
That I'll ever get to be a part of, alumni, but I'll never get to be a part of that team. Just amazing. And people still gave me some responsibility. But what happened was, right, the rest of the story is I was finally going to get my chance. They were actually going to let me deploy after rowing on staff for a while because I'm a hard worker, but I'm not good. I'm not. And I was finally going to get my chance. I went down to the clinic once we started reducing the force, at the conventional levels in both Afghanistan and then, the pull out of Iraq. All these things to get people out started showing up. Like if you had bad hearing, now that's connected to your profile. So I went in thinking I was going to deploy and had to go back to the S3 Ranger Regiment saying, I've got this piece of paper for the headquarters company commander and first sergeant to sign to say I'm part of the Army's med board process. Luckily, I was found unfit for duty, but allowed to stay in through appeals process. I thank the regimental commander, Chris Vanek, for allowing that to happen. And the leadership at the time, and they figured, hey, this guy will row pretty hard. Let's get him somewhere where he can't hurt himself or the organization anymore. And so that's how public affairs came about. It was never a career decision or do this to retirement. It was kind of forced to do it, and it was a blessing.
Yeah.
Everything that I say, I keep on saying that word because there are a lot of things that happened to me where I was lucky. I believe somebody's been watching out for me up high, and it's been a blessing. My marriage was about broken at that time. You're looking at 14 and a half years in. We had been married for 8 years, having a second kid while being on regimental staff. No marriage counselor would recommend that.
No.
At a time when regimental staff became work, it used to be not work. From what I heard, it was you row the boat pretty hard up there now. And so it was a lot. And if that change hadn't come where I was able to get away from regiment, go to my PO course, PAO course and kind of, recover a little bit mentally and better with the family, I don't know if I'd be married to this day. I definitely wouldn't be doing what I was doing now.
Yeah.
What I'm doing now, for sure. Yeah. It was a weird path to PAO.
Well, I definitely want to talk about being a PAO, and telling the story. But before I do, you got to cut yourself some slack. Because I left Ranger Regiment later part of 2009, and then I came back in the early part of 2012 when because I went up after my platoon sergeant time, and taught ROTC, and then came back. And I remember, and I was still up at Fort Lewis, and I was still doing a lot of things with Rangers, at the time, and staying in contact with a lot of people. But time away during those days, like it was, new acronyms, new ways of doing things, tactics, new departments were standing up, new warfighting functions, and everything else and in between was standing up. 10 years, and you're hopping to talk about like the largest transition to happen in Ranger Regiment history happened after that Iraq invasion. From 2004 to 2008, like everything about being a Ranger changed, other than the fact that we were Rangers. But what we were doing on target, how we were getting on target, how we were looked at, as from a strike force perspective, going from, support roles, unless it was, like you talked about, an isolated target out in the middle of nowhere. Now we're the primary effort in all these metropolitan cities in Afghanistan and in Iraq, and then just all the assets and everything else and technology that we had available, like, and the list goes on and on. So coming back, while you knew the Rangers, they were wearing tan berets, they were wearing different uniforms, and NCOs, these NCOs you talk about, they'd been rowing this entire time, and developing and, becoming completely different individuals, during that time. So I can see how that was a struggle, and it was hard to keep pace because, oh, by the way, the Ranger Regiment never slows down.
100%. And I appreciated that. And I knew my place, and it took, in Germany, probably wasn't going to come back over. I knew it. And in the 82nd, I went back and forth with whether or not, to submit a packet, because I just knew how different it was. And I didn't want to be a hanger on.
Yeah.
But at the end of the day, it was home, right? If I'm going to be in the Army, this is kind of where I wanted to be, and I wanted to be around the guys. Like you just miss that. And so I went from having peers, squad leaders, now they're op sergeant majors. And so when I become the public affairs officer, after seeing them all at MLATs and whatnot, and I have some funny, weird concepts, I have some guys to talk to, and I have some guys to talk to who matter, right? And can have a little bit of influence, and wanted to have influence in anything that would develop, in and around the Rangers. And so become the public affairs officer. I looked at that. It was that or EWO, by the way. I was given the chance to be an electronic warfare officer. I am not smart enough to be a good EWO. That's just true, right? Because that's a brain thing. That's a right brain, left brain. That's a science, technical field. I am concepts and theory, right? So honestly, like I'd work hard at it, but I don't know if it was really meant for that. So when your only other option is PAO, but it comes with a tan beret and a wall locker and human performance and all your buddies, like you take that. You take that in a heartbeat. And I rapidly realized, like, I get to tell the regiment's story. That's how I'm going to continue to serve, right? Like I'm not never going back on target, like that's not a me thing, right? But I get to tell within, the limits of what we're allowed to tell, like talk about this unit. Now, instead of feeling like, man, I can't keep up, and these guys have passed me by, but I can do something they can't do. And it's weird. Anybody could do a PAO job. No offense to PAOs out there, but yeah, the cat's out of the bag. But the point is, like, I got to do something that I think provided value, and I was struggling to provide that value, and feel that kind of like sense of like, man, I got to give back. What can I give back? And I was finally able to do it. And it was a pretty big deal to me.
No, it absolutely was. I mean, being able to tell the Ranger story, but don't sell yourself short. You did a lot of amazing things to get the story out there. They're the epic videos of, them doing the exercises in Miami was during your tenure, as a PAO. That was the first time that the PAO office worked with movie producers and also military directors, guys like, Jericho Denman and everything else to produce Army commercials that had Rangers in them and everything else. That all happened as your tenure as a PAO for the 75th.
So that got started a little bit out. I wasn't there, but we got it started. But the Ranger ingenuity like works everywhere. So we were like, man, if I can't just sit here. If you're a Ranger staff officer, you got enough to do during the day. Right. To actually do this content creation, we went down to, so I graduated from the Defense Information School. It's in Fort Meade. And while I'm down there, I'm like, go over to where they train all the combat cameramen. It's like, can we get some of your folks in Ranger Regiment? It's like, well, you don't have billets for them. I was like, yeah, but like, do you know how good they'll do? To this day, we still get combat camera people. I don't even know if there's a signed MOU.
I have no idea.
That's my point. We just made it happen. So the folks who did that were just all based on saying, like, we can't do it by ourselves. Let's get these great people. And then look what happens. They end up working with movie producers. You have those great ads that came out. And even to this day, within the first month of trying to do Facebook, we went from 250,000 to 400,000. Like, people want to know. You just got to give them what's allowable to be given. But people have to know. And where it comes back to me and everything that we've done with PAO and Ranger for Life, the big win to me, and this is kind of like how I want to give back for Regiment for the rest of my time, that I have an opportunity to. A win for me is if you have a RASP class and you ask them how many people are here because of a Ranger, and that number just continues to go up, and up. There's always going to be someone who comes in, blindly, does a Mayne and blindly gets to Ranger Regiment. But when you look at elite organizations and how we even hire in the civilian world, something that we deal with day to day here, it's all based on recommendations. So if our folks have to be the recruiters for the organization, that to me is what winning looks like, kind of long term. And we developed that pretty early on. Like, this is how we retain people. We're always going to have people 4 years and out, and that's okay. That's historically, it's always been a thing. And it hasn't really mattered if there was a war or not, as much as we say so when you look at it statistically. But if we're going to get quality, you would think that the Rangers and their experience would want, another American to come in and experience what they experienced.
I agree. So I think that brings us to the, what has become, your life's work now, and a culmination of all these things, some of the parts, as they say. And it's, I'm gonna let you explain it. I'll preface it as best as I can, but the categories we got is Three Rangers Foundation, Ranger for Life, Gallant Few, and then also the Ranger Outreach Center as well, and all how that's interweaved and wrapped in together. And you're definitely the man that kind of helps weave it all together, and definitely does a lot of this stuff for Rangers that are serving, and then also Rangers that have served in the past.
Well, and really, Mike, I think this is why I'm probably on the show too, right? It's because I want to continue to give back. I think that's there's a lesson in there for everybody. Not that you'll get on the Legends. It's not about that. It's that, like, some guy who was like just a regular, normal Ranger, you can continue to be a Ranger. Living the Ranger creed should be something, if we really looked at it, we should aspire to do. And when you look at the professionalism of the force over the years, like, that is something we should want to do. So when I talked about that PAO story, our goal, right, is to increase retention and recruit the best from America. I looked at what business models work. Like, I'm wearing an Ohio State sweatshirt right now at the Ranger Outreach Center. Why am I wearing an Ohio State sweatshirt? Because they're smart. They get you from the time you're young. They make you want to go, make you got to feel like you're a part of the state if you do it. And then when you go out, they have avenues for you to give back. What are we missing in the military? Those avenues to give back, you kind of got to find them yourself. It's not a natural process. But if we put it into the process, a Ranger for Life program, now it looks a little bit different. So we're only right now scratching the surface of what Ranger for Life will be. Phalanx is the program for the Ranger Regiment that helps with transition. But I think we're going to see an evolution of Ranger for Life where we can support Phalanx so much more. And every Ranger that wants to give back can be a Ranger for Life and give back. It's not owned to an organization and title. And if that confuses you, just don't let it. Just think Ranger for Life. There are give back mechanisms. But where I see we winning over time is, what are we doing at RAS-1 graduations for the families? About 50% of the families come, right?
Mm-hmm.
All right, well, let's start educating them and integrating them. What's expected of your son? We don't do it quite yet because we're really busy. Those instructors kind of want to break after they're done and like, let's get this ceremony over. Let's get this guest speaker out. We got to get them out to our battalions. We've got a lot of great opportunities. So this all started from the PAO shop. And Sergeant Major Hall will tell you, there's been a cohort of folks trying to do this for quite a while. My boss, Carl Monger, he started a group to really help Rangers who are kind of struggling more about 12 years ago. Well, when you're the PAO, you work with all the nonprofits. So I got to see what they were all doing. And just, you don't have to reinvent the wheel. You just need to steal the best parts and put a wheel, and then you put your own rim on it, right? And so that's kind of what we did. And it took Mike Allball and General Tegmeyer in the leadership position to decide that this is an official policy. So we are going to ensure that we're going to do our best to ensure that folks transition well. And then I mentioned that name, Mike Hall, several times today. He's the key to the kingdom, right? Here's a gentleman who's responsible in part in concept for the formation of the CARE Coalition, hired the first career counselor, who's now one of the transition counselors up at 275, Sergeant Major retired Ned Longoria. He's the honorary Sergeant Major of the regiment. He's going to give the keynote once again at the 3rd Ranger Battalion Ranger for Life Symposium that's happening the week that this is taping. So goodness gracious, Ranger for Life, there's an opportunity for folks to plug in, whether you're a business owner, whether you want to mentor. There's all these paths. So what do? I just try to integrate and allow people to find how they can help. And I have a little star on my note sheet. Now I want to thank you for the questions in advance. Some of our best mentors, right, are one-time enlisters.
Really?
We're especially in transition, we're trying to help Rangers become civilians. We're not trying to help Rangers become retired command sergeants major. We're not trying to help them become retired general officers. Right. So if you had a good experience and you started a business or you work for the defense contracting or the military industrial complex, whatever it may be, you probably, and you're successful, you have something to give back. Right. It's not, you have to. This is the one time we're being Ranger qualified. No one checks your shoulder in the civilian world. Don't wear your tab in the civilian world. It will be rather embarrassing for you. So that's just kind of a key point. And down here in Columbus, Georgia, we do have the Ranger Outreach Center. It is through a partnership with a church. And what we wanted to show people is if you're a nonprofit and you're kind of like more morally and ethically, like in line with what's moral and ethical, you need space. This is an example of what right looks like. I have a former Ranger Command Sergeant Major who later this month, he got into yoga and he is going to be using this facility, right? Because it's available, because we didn't limit ourselves. So that's a little bit, that was a hodgepodge of what we do, a little bit everywhere. But know that Mike Hall, we are blessed to have him in our midst and for the work that he continues to do for us. And if you need to find a way to plug in, just reach out to me and I'll give you an idea of where your talents might be used by any of these organizations.
No, it's an amazing program, everything you're doing, and the fact that you're a lot of the connective tissue that weaves it all. But it's something that Mike Hall said. It's something that General Crystal said. Sergeant Major Merritt said that, like, hey, when you served in Ranger Regiment, you're still part of the community. You're still part of it. And what are you doing to live up to the Ranger Creed? And how are you continuing to extend that out? And you might just not know, just like you said, You might not know where to go. And I can't remember who told me this one time. But we were talking, it was on a separate podcast. It was on actually any of the ones that I run. But basically what he was saying is you don't need to necessarily go out and start another nonprofit. There's so many out there. Get tied into one that's established, that is lined with the morals and values that you want to exhibit, and get involved with them, because there's so many of them out there. And, Ranger for Life and the Three Rangers Foundation and all the stuff that they're doing is a great way to do it. I mean, even Legends of the 75th. So the charitable donations that we've made have been to Gallant Few, Three Rangers, and then also something that Major retired Jeff Struker's doing, in a program that he's doing as well for Three Rangers. So do I necessarily need to start another company just to take care of Rangers? No. How about I just start a company that generates something so that we can actually, do charitable donations to ones that already exist. So now it's a great program, and I thank you for throwing me under the bus. I'm the weird ranger that now does yoga and is a yoga instructor, and will be running classes out of the rock. So more to follow, everybody, on that. Definitely pay attention. We'll be doing a lot of that stuff, but I don't want to get into that. And we're talking about you. So anyway, all right. Second to last question that I have for you. Actually, first of three questions. Okay. But this one is one that I'm absolutely loving to ask because the responses are amazing. If you could stand in front of all Rangers, past, present, and future, yes, we have a time machine that we can make this all happen, what would you say to them?
Because of who I am, like, this might be a unique one. Maybe not, unless you talk to Chaplain Stephen Barry. It's get right with God. Get right with what you think is your God. Get right with how you think the universe is made, and know that you're uniquely made in whatever that may be. I'm a Christian. I know what I believe, and that sustains me. So I want to do research. I'm a data-driven ranger. The coolest thing about watching Rangers on target is tracing back where it comes from. It comes from a bunch of hard work, and it comes from data. We try not to make mistakes because we try to take care of every variable. So the reason I could say, if I was standing in a group in front of Rangers or anybody, is to get right with your God, it's because faith matters. The biggest indicator of happiness, being healthy, and longevity is faith. If you want to see the studies, Tony at gallantfew.org, and I'll send you the studies. Throughout the history of mankind, being tied to a faith, whether you agree with it or not, different other faiths besides your own, has led to being healthy, happy, and longevity. So now we've turned something that's, kind of touchy-feely, our own independent thoughts, don't want to infringe on anybody. And now we look at it like data, right? Rangers are leaders. Get in the data. If there is one more suicide awareness program that doesn't have a strong faith component, it is statistically ready to fail. So if you're an Army leader, active duty military leader, and you see that, I hope it's on your conscience. I am not trying to turn everybody into Christianity. I read my book. That's not how the story ends. We actually got a book in the end that tells me how it ends. So that, at least I feel confident with that. But what I do know is why we're all still around, that if we really think about what and why we're here, healthier, happier, and live longer. Why would I say this in front of all Rangers to answer that question? Because only 1 in 4 or 1 in 5 Rangers that I talk to can answer that question. So I do not use what I do in transition as an ability to get that message out. I try to live that by example. But if somebody asks, we'll have a conversation. It's not something that we lead with, but I will ask, what is your faith component? Right? Oh, your date is these young Rangers, God bless them, they're dating somebody. It's like, well, have you talked about, that component? Because that's also going to affect about how money is spent, all these other things, right? There's all these other things related. That is what I would talk about.
I love it. It is definitely unique, and there's a lot to unpack there. But I'm just going to let it stand and let people think about it. And I'd encourage everybody to ask themselves a hard question about what you believe in and where your faith lies, because it's an important one. And just go ahead and send me that information, that data, because I want to see it. I love reading about stuff like that and processing it from that kind of perspective. So. Okay, second to last question. So you said Tony Mayne at Gallant Few. Is there other ways that are better to connect with you, or where can people find you?
So email and LinkedIn, everything else I'm trash at. And I try not to be, but phone and text, I can't figure it out. I don't know how people stay on their phone all day. I think the phone, people think like it helps get work done. I think it's an impediment to work.
It can be.
So honestly, one of the reasons that I stress LinkedIn is because if you're a Ranger and I get you on LinkedIn, you say, "Hey Tony, I heard you on the podcast. I'm going to go and see if you're in a bunch of groups where you can help Rangers."
Oh, okay.
It's a business decision as well. So, but LinkedIn and email are the two best. Tony at gallantfew.org or just Tony Mayne.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, no, I love LinkedIn. LinkedIn is a huge asset. All right. Any kind of final closing comments or thoughts or anything else you want to share with the group before I close this out?
Well, Mike, just thanks for what you're doing for the community. I know you get thanks from folks when they come on, but honestly, from our hearts, it's important. We were called to be quiet professionals, and although we did talk for quite a while, I think being a silent professional isn't good for mental health. So just being able to share some of these things with you are good for me. So thank you for that opportunity. And if there's ever anything that we can do for you or your listeners, please reach out.
I appreciate it, sir. And you've already done a shitload for me, so I can't thank you enough already. And this is just another one, taking the time to sit down with us on a Monday night, to have this conversation. So can't thank you enough. Hey, everyone else, I just want to thank you for tuning in to the Legends of the 75th. Hey, please share this episode so that we can make sure it gets out to all our Ranger buddies. Despite popular belief, not everybody actually knows that we have a podcast that's focused on the Legends of the 75th. So everybody do their part, share it out to a Ranger that you might know or somebody that wants to maybe kind of support us, subscribe, or hear the stories that are told. Rangers, lead the way.